One of the primary responsibilities of the Central Bank of Nigeria is external reserves management aimed at safeguarding the international value of the naira. In furtherance of this mandate, the CBN in the last 6 years has introduced a plethora of foreign exchange controls and intervened in several economic sectors in order to improve productivity and wean the country off its over-reliance on imports. In addition, the central bank has continued to fund the federal government's rising budget deficit through ways and means. All these occurred at a time when Nigeria's crude oil production and oil export earnings experienced a precipitous decline, rendering it almost impossible for the central bank to meet pent-up demand for foreign exchange. Expectedly, the dollar scarcity and decline in capital importation brought on by the foreign exchange controls has resulted in a forex crisis and debilitating erosion of the value of the naira. Well, joining us now to discuss the bleak situation in which Nigeria finds itself is Professor Pat Utomi, a political economist, academician, and former presidential candidate, who will also be talking to us about structural adjustments Nigeria's fiscal and monetary authorities will have to make to revive the economy and address the foreign exchange crisis. Welcome to the morning show, Professor Utomi. Good morning.
Good morning. Glad to be able to join you.
Well, Tono, in the introduction to this conversation, I talked about the fortunes of the naira, fiscal and monetary policies in Nigeria, and what we need to do. But I guess all of that are symptoms of something bigger, which is, the future of Nigeria itself. And yesterday, you were at an event in Abuja where a new political group was said to have emerged, Rescue Nigeria Project. The papers are reporting that today, that your good self and others have come up with a new political party. So is the Rescue Nigeria Project a political party? And what are the key issues that, you think, because you made a presentation there, key issues that you think we need to focus on as Nigeria moves towards 2023? Maybe we start with that as framework for this conversation.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much, Ruben. Part of my challenge with Nigeria as we're trying to build it up is that there's too much focus on power rather than purpose. Purpose of building a strong nation, viable, sustainable economy is, for me, the primary thing before this business of power. But we seem to be obsessed with power rather than purpose. So anytime there's a grouping that's designed to advance purpose, the question is, how are they going to get power? I think that what happened in Abuja yesterday was a accumulation of conversations between people who were thoughtful and focused on some problems. This particular group has been focused, and I remember being part of conversations in this group. In fact, in June, while I was in the US, I was involved in virtual meetings with the group that wanted to focus on the fact that Nigeria's major problem was quality of leadership. How do you ensure a process of selecting people for leadership positions in public life? And yesterday was a accumulation of conversations around that and a launching out of this initiative of let's find people of competence and capacity to deal with different aspects of our national life. And I was asked to speak to the challenge of the real issues in the economy so that we look at the quality of people who can respond to those real issues and begin to build from there. I think that people are rushing to, because Nigerians are desperate for something different, understandably, they're rushing to a conclusion anytime a group gets together to say we want to save our country. I expect about 3 or 4 more of these groups that I know of to emerge in the next couple of weeks. And I think many of them will focus on specific areas. This particular group is looking at the issue of quality leadership, competence, and courage, not the usual issues of where you come from and that kind of stuff. Another group that I'm associated with is been focusing on constitutional reform, electoral process reform. There's going to be a major, coming out for that group. offering Nigeria a draft new constitution, offering Nigeria a movement that says unless electronic transmission of election results are going to define how we go forward, then let's not have elections, because what we've had is a complete farce. We don't have elections in Nigeria, and there are people who are relying on state capture for abusing the electoral process and announcing that they have won elections. And that group will be so insistent with its work that it too will be seen, oh, this is one more movement. Then there will be another group, which I'm also familiar with, and I've participated in their work, that is going to focus on responsible economic management. I keep saying that we don't have a national strategy. How do we grow this economy? We keep throwing out numbers, oh, 4% growth, this, that. And that's, as far as I'm concerned, all hogwash, nonsense. We need to know how we will create this. Look, we're talking about borrowing the last couple of days. Lee Kuan Yew kept pressing down the real performance of the Singapore economy in the early days so that he could borrow liberally from IDA, International Development Association funds, which were very, very low interest, long term. But here, we're borrowing from all kinds of places with no clear strategy for how we're going to amortize those commitments, how these borrowings will lead to real growth in the economy, provide the millions of desperately needed jobs. What this country needs is a demographic dividend. We need to tap into this youth bulge by investing appropriately in our young people and make it the basis for the new growth and the expansion that this economy needs. I think that unless we see these things in this context, focusing on purpose, the obsession with power, this party, that party, will just make us poorer, more miserable, create more insecurity, and all the kinds of problems that we're dealing with today. So this is really the clear starting point. Purpose, not power.
And also service, one would hope. But my question for you is that, are you going to contest on this platform of the RMP or on any other platform? That I have to get that out of the way first. And also, another pressing issue for me, which I've been wanting you to answer, how do we get Nigeria producing again?
Yeah, that is the important question. What I do not do, those are trivialities. Any good person who fits all of these things can come forward, and I'd be very happy. If it turns out to be me, hey, it's a sacrifice that we have to make for the future of the children. But I'm not fixated on stuff like that. I am more on the purpose of how we get Nigeria to work again. Ironically, President Babangida was trending after his comments about the kind of person that Nigeria needs. I thought it was a fitting point to bring in President Babangida into conversation, especially as we were dealing with issues of foreign exchange management. In the remarks I made yesterday in Abuja, I had said that President Babangida, sometimes is the single issue narrative about people. President Babangida is often defined by one or two things, either the fact of the annulment of the election or the challenge with the laissez-faire style that seems to have increased corruption, and that's fair. But I think that people forget the kind of political sagacity it took President Babangida to work our country out of a foreign exchange market nightmare. Our economy was in such a horrible state because of a dirigist tradition in economic management, which left us without a market in foreign exchange. It was allocated. And so he went to 6 chiefs, 6 allergies, and stuff like that. Manufacturers didn't get it. Traders, proper traders didn't get it. And they had to add all the rent that they could extract to these people who had access. And when President Babangida came, of course, everybody went, oh, my academic friends from the left came at him and all of that. But he managed to dramatically play around all of this, bring us into what was called a structural adjustment program. A 2-tier foreign exchange markets firm was introduced as a first step, and then we achieved a market. Now, markets are built around the institutions. And the institutions put the boundaries that make markets possible. And we've lived for many years in this easy flow exchange market, but we refuse to let the institutions work. And the last couple of years, we've fractured those institutions, and suddenly the market is wobbling, the exchange rate is collapsing, and we begin to blame everybody. I think that it is that legacy of work that it took to build a foreign exchange market under General Babangida that we have to understand, study, and bring back on board in trying to bring new discipline into how we create markets. And what we need is creating new markets where they didn't exist. This prosperity of this country in recent years were created by a market that didn't exist in telecommunications. Look how many hundreds of thousands, if not millions of jobs have been created by this new market in telecommunications that followed. The institution building of the NCC, the auction of GSM licenses, and that process, we need to understand that we can do it in several sectors and expand this economy and create the growth that we require. Come to your specific point about production. My point of joy. To grow this economy, we need to look at our factor endowments. You know, under the import substitution industrialization logic, the Raoul Prebisch's thesis, we just took our import list and deleted. Oh, what can we produce? And so at the point in time, what ISI produced for Nigeria was a brewery in every village in eastern Nigeria. That's my joke. But breweries were thriving, you know, because we could just substitute that from our import list very easily, delete, and move forward. However, it was not sustainable. What our Asian friends did when we all started out with this same Prebisch thesis was quickly move to export-led industrialization and use industrial policy to support that. Okay, broad industrial policy, which Chang, the South Korean economist at Cambridge, would typically argue for in his Bad Samaritans writings, is what for South Korea at a period in history right now is not the best way to go. We have to be very selective. Take our factor endowments. What are we endowed with as a country? Okay, North Central, it's sesame seeds. Northwest is gum arabic, is this. South-South, hydrocarbons value chains. Southwest is cocoa, is this. Take those endowments, literally build economies around those endowments. That includes education. The kind of education you give somebody who lives in North Central should be such that by the time he's in Form, I don't know, JS3 or SS3, he knows everything about sesame seeds. He can run a small business that can add value to the sesame seeds, production, refining, process. And there are people whose only skill is identifying the use of sesame seeds in Europe, North America, and aggregating what is produced across North Central so that they can access international markets. I have said, for example, that we need, if you look at what Japanese ascendancy took, the Marubenis of this world, that essentially became aggregating companies that enabled them to considerably play in international trade. Look, if we want to export, and there's a clear example of some Indian firm in Nigeria that tried to produce garments. It didn't work. They spent so much money wasting, pounding the tables in Abuja. After a while, they created their stuff, moved it to Kenya. And today, they're supplying Walmart more than 10,000 blue jeans a day. But that is even nothing for what Walmart needs. So you got the aggregators who will get 20, 30, 40 of those people, even if it's across borders. Pull them together and sign a proper contract with Walmart for 1 million pieces of blue jeans delivered in Delaware or wherever it is every Monday morning at 7 a.m. and it works. That's what the Marubenis did for Japan. And some of the chaebols in South Korea managed to do. We must move ourselves towards these kinds of organizational structures for light manufacturing, and we can break the country up into different regions. What kind of light manufacturing? I would focus on leather goods in Aba, for example, and apparels. I would focus, like I said, in different parts of the country, based on their local endowments, and then support those who produce, not those who extract rent. We talk so much about what has been given, so much money by CBN, so much money by that, and you don't see the effect.
Okay, sir.
See, part of the way that, okay, all right.
Okay, I mean, great point you've been making, sir. But, I mean, the big argument here will be, yes, it's good to be pioneers. I think it was, what's his name now, Henry Ford, wrote a book in 1923 called it Today and Tomorrow, and talked about how he was a pioneer in the auto sector, because prior to that time, it was only Carnegie producing steel. So, but how can you be a pioneer in a country where the government is too big, and the government, in the bid of regulation, stifles everything? I mean, a clear instance is this final resort to digital naira. I remember a couple of years back how every digital currency was frowned on by the government. In fact, it was said we should not give it publicity or air at all. But finally, we're coming to the digital naira now. So, I mean, how do you break it? Because that's the problem with a lot of people. They're complaining that we want to be pioneers and innovate, but the government is too big and it's stopping everything.
I don't know where to enter this, your question. Great question. But if I enter it from, I can talk for 2 hours. Should I come from a Ford angle? Should I come from the naira? Anyway, let me start somewhere. One of the things I've said frequently, and I say it in complete good faith, is that the biggest risk of doing business in Nigeria is regulatory risk. The regulator is dangerous in Nigeria. This is because there's a cultural problem. If you are given a uniform in Nigeria, you are defined as a bully. So you are last man. So you harass people. You are police uniform. How can we change mindsets of authority to realize that their business is to facilitate, not to bully? The Nigerian government is the reason business fails in Nigeria. Look, the Forbes article, I think 28 May 2019, Nigeria, Africa's money-losing machine. Essentially, it's making the point that if you want to lose money, go into Nigeria. Okay, fine. Let's leave foreign direct investment for now, because part of what I've argued, and it goes back, in the 50s, there was this economist at Columbia called Ragnar Noxe, and his thesis was, capital is made at home. Foreign direct investment can stimulate things, it's very important, it's very useful, but let's make capital at home. But you know what? Government is preventing capital from being made at home. And I don't think it's because they're wicked, it's because they're ignorant. So we have a joint lesson to educate each other on how we can build an economy. Innovate, innovate, innovate. We cannot make progress without innovation. And innovation is going to be difficult. And those who innovate are usually 10 steps ahead of those who regulate. They know so much better than those who regulate. And those who regulate see their position as stopping these rascals. And in the end, we lose out. We don't make the progress. Look at Ford that you mentioned. People give Ford credit for many things. The moving assembly line is the ultimate credit he gets for revolutionizing manufacturing. In fact, changing, the Industrial Revolution. But Ford's greatest success was as a HR genius. Ford in wages. When Ford doubled wages and created the minimum wage of $5 in 1914, I think, people were, even Wall Street Journal, to show how this can be for innovators, Wall Street Journal wrote an editorial accusing Ford of creating problems for other manufacturers, other producers, and all of that. But that action by Ford actually created the middle class as we know it in America today. Some people argue that the reason he did it was because he said those who produce these cars should be able to afford to buy them. Others argue, there's Ted Lowe at Harvard who wrote The Giants of Industry, who spoke different perspective. His colleague, the now late Clayton Christensen, in the Prosperity Paradox, takes a different perspective on the same Ford choices. But the issue was that Henry Ford was a bloody good innovator. And his major innovations that changed America were in the human relations, labor management, area, even though he's giving more credit for the technology area of the Model T Ford and the moving assembly line. I think that what we must do in this country is facilitate innovators, because innovators are going into areas that have not been tried and tested. Nigerian banks are a disaster. If I have my way, I will shut down the Nigerian banking system as it exists today. They will not lead us to progress. And then the development banks are making things worse. Oh, passing the risk to commercial banks. So who is going to grow the economy? Because those who have the ideas, who will innovate, are ahead of them. And the things that they are doing, you know, the banks don't understand or don't want to be involved in. Because it's not easy, sit in the office with your fancy tie, drive BMW things. No, those are not things that create wealth. These are rents that they are extracting from the system. In some ways, well, it was progress. I feel personally pained for the fight that some of us fought in the 80s, pushing the General Babangidas of this world to open up that space. Because the bankers that came out of it are all just big men now extracting rent. The whole idea of the fight that some of us fought, and were called names in the 80s, was essentially to be able to create a financial system that will drive growth and help this economy really come out of the situation it was in with an oligopolistic banking system that did not really finance growth. But we had our spots, we had the push, but they became too used to easy money. And this is what Nigeria is struggling with now. You need innovators in banking, and I'm glad what the fintech chaps are doing, because it will shake up that industry and help us begin to truly create opportunities for people who are non-consumers, as Clayton Christensen will call them. So my challenge now is, how do we get people who are politicians to understand these things? You know, somebody said to me, look, I've lost my job. I don't have anything to do. I can go into politics now. Politics is not for people who don't have anything to do. It's for people who want to change the world, who have ideas about where the world is going and how they can apply, you know, the levers of power to facilitate that happening. And I think you all have a duty, you, Rufai, Ruben, all of you, because you are communicating to people, you can make people better understand these things and facilitate where this country can be, because the potential of Nigeria remains tremendous in spite of what we see. However, limited capacity on the part of people in public life has been fairly hazardous for the possibilities of Nigeria.
Well, Prof, one of the major news items in the last week has been Nigeria trying to raise $4 billion through Eurobonds. And today, there is some excitement in the papers about how this has been oversubscribed. Nigeria has come up with an exceptional outcome, and all of what that will do to fund a budget deficit of 5.6 trillion, build investor confidence, increase the value of the naira. But the big elephant in the room is the rising debt profile of Nigeria, and all those concerns that have been expressed by Dr. Doyin Salami of the Economic Advisory Committee, by Dr. Boniface Chizia, who is asking for you know, limits to be defined in terms of how much we continue to borrow. And also Bismarck Rewane of Financial Derivatives, who says, you know, we really need to worry about the rising debt profile. But what's your position in all of this? Do you think that, you know, this is the best way to address foreign exchange problem and to save the naira?
Well, I think that, you know, first of all, you have to take away this single issue perspective that to borrow is necessarily dangerous. It's not necessarily dangerous. What is dangerous is to borrow without a clear plan. And clear plan includes the targeting, what the money is going to be deployed for, and the multipliers that will come from the deployment of that borrowed money. Now, I want to go back to a story, and I mentioned that somewhere a few days ago, and I'm not so sure whether it's General Utomi or Luleye I mentioned. The Federal Commissioner for Finance under General Obasanjo, back in the, I think it was Jojo Luleye, I think. Anyway, he, being in finance at the time that Nigeria began to earn lots of money, Western banks were, their vaults were overflowing with petrodollars. When oil prices spiked following the Yom Kippur Arab-Israeli War in 1973, and obviously all the monies they were earning that were way outside of what they used to earn were deposited in Western banks. Western banks wanted to recycle these petrodollars, and they began to urge poor countries to borrow. They turned to a country like Nigeria and said, you are under borrowed for what the possibilities are. Technically speaking, that was true if we were smart enough to deploy those massively into infrastructure that will open up the country, do many things that will lead to more growth, pay off those debts. But we didn't, we have an absorptive capacity problem. I mean, let's just take what happened to the ports. The ports, we started building Tinkan Island port. I remember when President Jimmy Carter came here in 1977, and we were struggling with the Tinkan ports project, everything. We had a cement armada. So it was an absorptive capacity problem. Anyway, we borrowed the monies. And suddenly oil prices went plunk. And we were in a challenge with debt. But what did General Obasanjo do, which is the point I really want to make for our friends in power today? General Obasanjo realized where we were. The first thing to do was cut spending. He trimmed government remarkably, and symbolically went to things like low profile. Biggest car anybody, head of state, could drive in government was the Peugeot 504. That is the first thing you do when you are owing money as a family, because there's no difference between running a family and running a country. It's just that the other one is bigger. You then, having trimmed your costs, and I don't see anybody trimming any costs right now. I've talked about the Oronsai report and what we have or have not done with it. People still think that governors must fly around in private jets and that all kinds of things of those natures should happen. Now, if we could then, after trimming costs, say to ourselves, what do we want to stimulate? I talked earlier about latent comparative advantage and value chains, in targeted industrial policy development. We say, okay, this money that is coming, we will use it to drive the value chain of sesame seeds until we become globally dominant in this play and we'll be earning these kinds of returns in 5 years, in 10 years. Then please borrow, borrow, and borrow if that's what you will do. But don't borrow to give security votes to a governor. Please don't do that. It will be criminal. Second thing, there's also a moral problem about borrowing to leave trouble for your successors. And I'm glad General Obasanjo picked up on this in one of his comments. We need to be careful. This is a lame duck government already. They have to be careful. In fact, in the American system, once there's a president-elect, for example, you couldn't make any major decision without consulting him. That is a way to ensure that you don't dump on your successors something that does not fit into how he will manage after. So this is a lame duck government. Let us be careful about how we use public resources because of its consequence for those who will succeed, the incumbents. Now, if we were to take these things into consideration, we have to then bear in mind, okay, oh yes, the bonds have been oversubscribed and all of that. Of course they will be. They are sovereign debt. We will pay them back. We are so many million people here, we can be taxed, we can be sold as slaves, whatever. They know they can get their money back. And that goes to a second very important point about borrowing. One of the things that Joe Stiglitz argued, which I agree with so completely, in globalization and its discontents, is that Western banks did not have the moral temerity to press down on countries like Nigeria that got into a debt problem because they gave irresponsible loans. But they use the IMF as their policeman to pressure those countries to pay back debts that were not reasonable to have been extended. As commercial activities, those debts should fail because the banks that give them are irresponsible. When we talk with bankers, we're always facing one side of this information asymmetry frame, which is the moral hazard. The people who take monies from banks and their intentions are not properly disclosed. But there is also the adverse selection. When a bank knows that this money is going to lend to this person, will do it damage, and lends it because it wants to keep. And it's easier to do now in Nigeria because EFCC and everybody will chase after the borrower without asking the question, was the bank's lending responsible? So banking has stopped being a commercial transaction. It has fallen into the trap of the IMF helping poor countries in getting back this loan that Joseph Stiglitz, the amiable Nobel Prize laureate, argued in Globalization and its Discontents. So we need to be careful. And Doing is right, we need to be careful. But if Doing and his team can think out the clear path and the guys in government can be honest that they will implement, then by golly, borrow.
Well, thank you very much, Professor Utomi, for joining us on the Morning Show today. Thank you very much indeed.